Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another webinar in our series today at Abhyas Institute of Universal Awareness. My name is Priyanka, and I am an executive business developer and wellness specialist. And today I will be the moderator for today's webinar. So before I dive into our exciting topic and introduce you to our esteemed panel member, I think it's good to just kind of share a little bit about what we're trying to achieve here with these webinars. So these webinars that we have created are designed to bring communities together of like-minded individuals so that everyone has an opportunity to expand their awareness based off of topics that we set here at Abhyas. However, we don't want people to feel that these webinars are designed to provide any types of solutions to participants. That is not their intention. But saying that, our panel members have been so generous in the past that they have shared tools and tips and tricks with individuals. So by all means, definitely take notes, ask questions, put in any comments in the chat. I will be moderating that throughout our webinar today. And so a little bit about Abhyas. Who are we and what's our vision? So here at Abhyas, it is through the application of experiential knowledge that we envision a paradigm shift in society's perspective, equipping it with the ability to face the challenge as is. And our mission here at Abhyas is to be committed to equipping individuals with equal opportunities by providing professional training to impart courses on mental well-being, creating therefore a better future for every individual and humanity at large. So with that, let's dive into this exciting discussion. We're going to first start with introducing our panel member today. I want to very warmly welcome Dr. Augustine Nawana, who is a program team leader. So Dr. Nawana is a Global University Systems Fellow and Program Team Leader at the School of Business Management and Creativity at Arden University in the UK. He has worked internationally in education for over 30 years. Apart from his mainstream academic work, research and teaching in universities, his consultancy work has included executive coaching, business development, as well as academic mentoring. He has also served as a consultant for the VDEM Institute, which is an independent political science research institute based at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, as well as Chevening reading committees. So welcome, Dr. Nawana. It's an amazing pleasure to have you here with us today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Priya. It's really an honor for me to be on this panel.
Thank you. So we're going to actually start with a bit of a, I guess, a little bit of getting to know you at this point in time. And so it would be really great to know a little bit about your journey, Dr. Nawana, how you've got to this amazing position where you are such an inspirational leader for many in the academic industry. And then it would be really interesting to understand from you why this topic resonates with you and what connection you feel to this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My journey professionally as a teacher and an administrator has been a long one, relatively long. But to keep it really brief and concise, it culminated to a position whereby I take pleasure in elevating others, hence the idea of being very interested in uh, coaching in both academic and corporate sectors, helping people transform their businesses and their leadership visions within the business, within the corporate sector. Within my day job, which is academic, working in a university, I work in both School of Education and School of Business, quite across the board. And innovation is very much a foundation to
mm,
how those areas like education and also business itself just drives on. So I draw from in higher education about uh, 25 to 26 years of practice in higher education,
mm,
uh, teaching and working with researchers across the board from undergraduate to doctoral and
mm,
postdoctoral scholars.
mm,
I've looked into tens of case studies of innovations. I've engaged
mm,
with lots of colleagues that are also thinking along the same line about innovation. And I've also written quite extensively about innovating both higher education and innovation in the corporate sector. I was just talking recently about uh,
mm,
my book of last year, published last year, January,
mhm.
which featured a whole chapter on open innovation as a factor for development in Africa or global south.
Ah, really interesting. So, Dr. Nawana, there's so many amazing things we're going to be able to talk about today. I'm very keen to, I guess, hear from you on the aspect of uh, development and application of innovation in the education sector, corporate sector, and of course, the amazing work you're doing in Africa. So, before we move into that direction of innovation, I was thinking it would be really nice to be able to understand. From your expertise, what is disruption? What does it mean to you? And how do you feel it's been just a very pivotal point for turning people around to experiencing more growth and transformation in their lives?
Yeah, when I look at the scholarship of disruption and even the practice, really, one of the things that have challenged organizations is what we call the innovation dilemma. The innovation
Mm,
dilemma, which phew, that is where the disruption starts, is here we are, for instance, in an organization, Abhyas.
mm,
Abhyas have, for instance, the type of people that the organization wants to reach to, for instance, their
mhm,
customers. And
mhm,
customers are usually sometimes for progressive or prosperous organizations, very happy with what they get.
mm,
And out of a sudden, when you start thinking about radically changing the model of what you give the customers, it can bring a lot of discontent. So, for leadership in organizations of that nature, having to deal with customers who don't want that radical change and
mm,
looking at the industry environment, which is changing so fast, rapidly, that perhaps they might get out of business if they don't if they don't change very rapidly. That
mm,
spells what we call the dilemma. They
mm,
are trapped between satisfying the customers who want business as usual and thriving
mm,
in the innovation or driving towards the innovation which they think that is necessary for them to stay in business. So that is one of the critical things that trouble people in leadership in business.
mm, mm,
When we
mm.
discuss further, we might start looking at some examples of how this has really disrupted the minds of leaders. So, my first critical
Yeah, that's
point
really
is that innovation disruption in the form of a dilemma that leaders face.
disruption in the form of a dilemma that leaders face. Yes. So, it would be really interesting to know a little bit about how you've been able to really turn this around, to take it in this way where you've become an inspirational leader yourself in the industries that you have worked in. Would you be able to share some of that
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah,
our?
yeah.
Mm,
Very interesting that particular question. Why? Because I can put it straight on my street, which is in higher education. You see, I'm a typical teacher of the 1980s. A lot of people listening to us now cannot imagine starting teaching in 1985 and you are still at it now. And using modern technology and digital tools and um, generative artificial intelligence and extended language models and all that now.
Mm,
But I
mm,
started with chalk and talk in
mm,
1980s, early 80s. We started with chalk and talk. That is, you have a white chalk and you have a blackboard, and you have 100 and something students in front of you. Get on with it
mm,
and teach. But
mm,
today,
mm,
we are using all sort of digital tools. When eventually internet was introduced and distance learning started being digital, it seemed
yes.
as if we're out of the job, didn't isn't it? it would
Yes.
it would have it would have literally spelled the end of the road for some of us who come from the
Mm,
80s. And
mm,
starting my teaching career in a developing country, to be specific, Cameroon, where that was not where you have the cutting edge technology by any
mm,
means. But moving into the UK through Norway,
mm,
and then starting the journey in higher education in 2000 in the UK, the question at that time was that, oh gosh, okay, with distance learning and e-learning and the internet, whether it is Web 1, Web 2, third generation, fifth generation, 5G, and all that, is it not spelling the end of the road for those of us who are of the older generation? The answer is it might challenge us a little bit. But what do you have to do? You have to adapt to the pace of change. So that was my solution to being totally obsolete and redundant in the teaching space. But I can bet you now that um, any digital technology that has any relevance to what I do, I would continue learning it. I will make sure that I keep pace with it. And that, in my view, is what I would really advise any other colleague who is of my generation to do with respect to being a thought leader in your area. Look at what is relevant to you. Leave what is not relevant to you to do what it's doing, but ask the question, is Zoom appropriate for me when I do distance learning? If the answer is yes, you must get to the depth of how to use it. And if you do that, there is no age. I can be in my 60s, but I'm still doing the digital tools just as well as I should be if I was a millennial.
yes. Now that's really interesting you mentioned that. So I was, thinking a little bit about this element of innovation dilemma that you mentioned, and you've absolutely, really pointed out the very relevant fact that we used to be of a generation where it was chalk and talk, and I love that saying actually, chalk and talk, where it was we would just come and sit down together and nut things out together. We would get on with it, as you mentioned. And so this element of how there's been a rise in the use of Internet of Things, there's been digitization, it does very much, as you mentioned, create an opportunity that we have to adapt because if we don't, we do become redundant. So
That's true.
it's fair to say that essentially leading us to let go of a lot of our old belief systems. Wouldn't you say so, Doctor?
Definitely, definitely.
Mm, mm,
Well, um, that doesn't mean that um, a certain level of inertia that is, did put your heels on the ground and really question the evidence
Mm.
is not necessary. I believe that too, which in practice, especially when you try and look at enterprise architecture, for instance, when you do business transformation, I'm talking in the area of consultancy now. Okay, you have to do
Mhm.
digital transformation for an organization for one technology that is out there. Take, for instance, cloud uh, uh, um, cloud systems, cloud computing for an organization. For one simple technology like that, there could be 100 options for you to take. The question is, are you really, really ready to apply the value, to measure the value that each of those 100 options bring into your business? Or you're going to change into the digital, or that particular, buy a particular cloud computing system just as a matter of novelty, for instance. So some organizations can get really, really excited and say the novelty of the, look at how it looks very nice, it looks this, but without questioning, does it really add value? Can it
Mm.
upgrade my business model? Am I going to reach new customers as a result of this? If not,
Mm.
this is not necessary.
Mm.
When I say this, some people might think that, oh, he's trying to be old-fashioned in that, that sense. So I'm also saying by this point that you don't embrace technology just for the novelty of it without looking at the value added that it brings onto your system. You have to sometimes resist some of it. For instance, if a technology was designed for another industry, you can't forcefully implant it into yours.
Mm. Mm.
Which
Absolutely.
is just not sometimes a wise thing. Otherwise, you would just, it's just going to be playing around the peripheries of your business,
Mm.
serving a rather superficial purpose, window dressing rather than addressing the real transformation that your customers need, or reaching new audiences, increasing your revenue, or increasing your profit margin. So digitization for digitization's sake, for instance, as an example, is is in itself a strategic mistake.
That's a really valid point you mentioned there. And I used to work in the government sector, and I've worked in many public service agencies. And in the technical space, you would find that some of them would tend to do things like that, where they wouldn't see the value of the organization and how that tool, that digital tool, fits in to take them in that direction of transformation. So, what I'm hearing here, Dr. Nawana, is when we are experiencing disruption, especially in this innovation dilemma that we all seem to be in, is oh my gosh, I have to innovate, I have to innovate. There's this urgency to innovate. It's actually more about your involvement. How involved are you? How connected are you to your values? And what do you foresee to be the direction you want to transform your organization in? Would you want to comment on that, particularly in the area of education, and perhaps even share a little bit in that space what your the work you've been doing in Africa as well, please?
Yeah, looking at the space of innovation and the actual, I don't know whether in the public sector we can start talking about enterprise architecture in that sense, which means um, from end to end, what is it that you want to be delivering? If you cannot connect that to the enterprise architecture of your actual uh, uh, work that you are doing, then it starts becoming really problematic. So in education, for instance, um, well, let's use the very recent event, which is uh, the pandemic that came across, and we had to really figure out with the social distancing, which education otherwise is not a business of social distance. It's a business that is very social, which means you bring hundreds and possibly thousands of people together and they co-create knowledge as a learning journey or um, transformation both personally and collectively. So it's never something that you put a social distance in between, which means stay there, I stay here, and let's get it done. So in terms of the enterprise architecture of education, which the teacher in his own noble role is the instigator of that journey. Um, the pandemic came and put social distance in between in a business that is inherently social. So that is where we start saying, okay, under the circumstances, how can we really either fight this pandemic by adopting a particular mode of delivery that is going to really help in this area, carry on having education without necessarily fighting against the social distancing. And then distance learning became a very important part of it. But distance learning not being a new phenomenon, distance learning uh, existed even before the age of the internet. But would it post material to students by snail mail? They will get booklets and task booklets by snail mail, and they work it out, put it back in the post, and it comes to us, and we'll work it out and interact in that manner. But round the corner, we could say, oh, okay, we now have video streaming technology that can actually do that same job in real time and without going through the snail mailing. So it all depends on how you monitor and audit the services that you are providing. It's always very important, which in this case, I'm talking about what I referred to earlier as the enterprise architecture. What do you want to deliver? What is the journey? What is the line from A to B of what I want to deliver to the customers? And what in between can we use in facilitating this journey? Always very important. Even in government services, well, I've in recent months been dealing with certain services uh, with the public sector, and one of the questions I had is that, come on, today, 21st century, you can't really be expecting me to travel 90 something miles to come and get this done when in fact it is a 20-minute job just uploading some of the documents and I'll have it right in my hands here. Why is it that we are still struggling to digitize certain areas? But it requires total thinking through and looking at whether something is available that can facilitate this service. It's always very important to reevaluate and look at the architecture of what you offer.
Mm,
That cuts across different elements. What are the 17 components of Millennium Development Goals? Each of those areas will have elements of it which, if you digitize and create a certain, taking technology and digitization as an example across those
Mm,
17 categories, you will find that
mm.
if you understand the architecture of what you want to deliver, digitization can actually play a role. Digitization just being an example, one example
Mm.
of innovation in that sense.
Yeah, so Dr. Nawana, it was really interesting what you were sharing, how during the time of COVID, when more and more students had to, well, not just students, but even, the whole education system had to adapt and change because they were being disrupted by something that was very natural, which is
Mhm,
bringing
mhm.
in social distancing in an aspect that expects to be social. So I'm interested in understanding here, Dr. Nawana. Um, I guess this would have created space for things to arise. Like, interested to know what kinds of things did you notice arising for people from, I guess you could say, from a mental health perspective, emotional regulation perspective, and then I guess I'm also interested in understanding from you, how was it that people were able to turn this disruption around and still be able to grow from it?
Wow, that's well, I like the way you're really engineering the conversation in terms of where we are going. There is a natural presumption in our minds to think of disruption as a negative, a negative imposition on us. You see, disruption in terms of innovation, you can see it as negative and something that comes to put people out of business, and as a window of opportunity for me to shift in my paradigm, challenging you to think laterally, think out of the box sometimes. It's a bit painful when it comes, but when you get over it, in a lot of cases, you would say that I'm glad this disruption came. Without this disruption, I would have been out of business, or I would have been in a totally different position. So I'm taking this particular premise to say that innovation can disruption can actually be a negative as well as a positive aspect when it comes to innovation. So though it comes with the earlier point which I made, which was about disruption, the innovation dilemma, uh, it can also be an opportunity to shift away from your business as usual. There is this colleague who uh, who has done a lot of work from the 90s up to now in Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They call him Clayton Christensen. Clayton Christensen has done a lot of work on innovation and how the disruption has happened across the world, from the motor industry in America to Japan and around the world. One of the things he said, it is sometimes the attitude that matters. So in a later publication, which is quite recent, with another group of colleagues, they actually say that innovative leaders, because they carried out a large survey of people they thought were innovative, and they discovered something about them, which is unique, which is that there is something which is almost like being in their DNA to in terms of innovation. They refer to their book Innovation DNA, Innovators DNA. which is interesting because it's got nothing to do with genetic science and and all that. But the point they are making is that um, innovation, which is one of the concepts that are just overused without being put into perspective, comes, first of all, it can be a leadership quality in people. In that sense, it becomes part of your DNA. That's the way you behave. And it can be seen as a way of project management, which is a specific technique of doing things, applying research and development. So it's always very, very important to put these into real perspective about what sort of innovation are we really looking at here. When it disrupts, how do I respond to it, therefore? Uh, do I really ignore it? Because I know we can remember some people take it as a matter of survival and say that, well, I've got to survive and therefore I have to innovate. Or some would say that, no, I can't be dealing with this. I'm out now. I have to retire now and let everyone else deal with this. So it's a matter of attitude as far as I'm concerned. And sometimes embracing it or not embracing it is a choice that we have to make.
Definitely. Like, I think it's really interesting what you mentioned here, that it's all about that paradigm shift, about how do you see that disruption in a way that it's an opportunity for you to grow. So I'm interested in, I guess, hearing from you. We spoke about attitudes and how a person's attitude can really determine how they see that disruption as an opportunity to innovate.
Mm, 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 mm,
So, what is it that's needed to shift the attitude in the first place?
mhm.
What happens at the psychological level, or even in the physical level? Like, because there's all sorts of innovations that we can look at. Really, we can go from very simple innovations such as the first time we used dial-up, and and had snail mail to this day today where we use apps to track our heart rate. um yeah, so interested in those two aspects, on your views on that. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. I guess a conversation like the one we're having sometimes it becomes very abstract to over conceptualize, to overthink it. Otherwise, we have started by first of all qualifying the types of innovations that do exist. We do have innovations in lines that do not really disrupt. Some are just incremental. Some are just incremental and they don't disrupt anything. For instance, if you take this video streaming that we're doing, and your innovation is just to review your costs and try and make it maybe $100 cheaper. I don't know how, but that is not going to disrupt much. It's, that could be just a methodological shift in the efficiency innovation in that sense, just incremental. There are some that are more about effectiveness, irrespective of how radical it is. It is about delivering what you want to deliver to more people in more places. That's the effectiveness of it. But when it comes to total of rooting of the business model, That's when disruptions start coming in. So the type of innovation that we talk about could really determine the extent to which the embracing or moving away from it can come, the extent of disruption that it brings, and also it could be about leadership too, because where a particular innovation attracts a lot of dilemma could perhaps be determined by whether the leader actually secured some buy-in on good time, communication was smooth, and then the customers will understand that I think we need this innovation, or maybe not. So there are those factors that play into this whole set of scenarios.
Yes, definitely. Let's actually elaborate a little bit more on the role that leaders play in being able to shift people's views of how to see disruption as an opportunity for innovation. And what do you think leaders do within themselves to be able to create that shift that then leads to a ripple effect outside? What sorts of things do they do?
I mentioned that on passing a little bit earlier when we talked about uh, Clayton's and the colleagues' research about innovators' DNA. So he has like 5 categories of the way leaders play a role in innovation. So he likened such leaders to anthropologists. You know, those people who conduct research in the community by being part of that community. And then that brings to mind a kind of public TV program that used to run. I loved watching it. It's called how do they call it? Undercover Boss. That that happened in yeah, the last one I watched was in Australia. Perhaps we're still in
I
Australia
remember
in
that
Asia.
show. I remember that show. It's
So
very
undercover boss.
amusing.
So you can see you see I was one of the key people in Abhyas, and I come there and I offer to clean the office or to be a janitor in the office and try and listen to people, work as an anthropologist within the organization. And that is a it sounds simple, but that is a kind of leadership that Christensen or Clayton and the Christensen and the friends were talking about. That innovative leaders have a very deep sense of trying to perceive their environment, and they experiment. They create prototype of things in their small desk at the end of the when they get back to the office, and they experiment, they pilot, they test things, they work with people rather than on people in order to do that. Sometimes even without you realizing, just like the undercover bosses did. So leadership has a very, very important factor in innovation. It's not only at the corporate level that you're going to say that we're going to invest this number of millions on research and development. That's not the whole story. Leadership is a very, very important factor for innovation, not necessarily because the leader is a super thinker, but because he works or she works with people. And the undercover boss is a very nice example for me to to use in that aspect.
Yes, oh, I do remember that show. It's been a while, actually. So what I guess what I'm hearing here is that leaders really need to be meeting people where they are at, and also being very inclusive.
That's
Yes.
right. Mhm, mhm.
Mm, mm, yes.
Because the authentic reality of any organization's functioning lie in the operations, lie in the people, and lie in the technology. And if you don't understand it, and if you're at the top there in a C-suite,
Mm,
and you are only concerned with policies and issuing of instructions without going to the shop floor to see what is happening, it's always going to be challenging for you. You could literally bury yourself in your own little world there, thinking that you know what is happening in the organization when in fact you don't.
mm, definitely. I guess the only like there's a few more elements that I think would be really worth exploring. So we've spoken about the really amazing qualities that leaders have, and one of them is that they really do need to learn to listen to people and really see what's happening on the ground. What do you think is really needed for leaders to be able to deal with that change and uncertainty, to take themselves forward into transformation, but also to be an inspirational figure for others to want to follow on that path? What do you think is needed for that in terms of internal change?
Internal change. Yeah, that's fantastic. Very, very critical leadership and management question there. Why? Because um, strategic leaders are associated to strategy. That's what they should lay claims on. I led this organization to this particular strategic direction. I led it to that. So two things that are very, very critical. A strategy is different from a plan. Okay, and this is very important here. I always like to highlight this. When you develop a strategy, there's a certain level of risks associated to this, which means we have decided to take this direction. But that really requires the leader to understand the industry. It's almost like going strategy from in terms of its origin. I hate going into this conceptualization, but it's also a little bit important to go into it. Strategy, as a matter of origin, came from war. Okay, so it came from military generals and saying that we're going to head east or head west, and we are going to create a backup in the north, and so on and so on, and then we head that way. So if you don't know who you are competing with, know what it takes to win the battle, you cannot devise a strategy. So that is what strategy is all about. But with a plan, you start a plan with an end in mind, which means you already know what you want and you are working towards that thing that you want. It doesn't matter whether it's wrong or right, you just work towards it. Right? But with a strategy, you are literally devising a window for winning. If you don't understand the whole war, you will not understand what strategy to take, which means if you don't understand your industry and what gives you the unique selling point, you will not devise a strategy. But once you stick on a plan, which in fact has not been strategically thought through, you'll be working towards an outcome that is not going to make any difference. That's not going to be consequential. So a plan and a strategy, they're connected, but not the same thing. And the leaders have got to really, really be switched on with this. They have to understand this. You have a strategy first, build priorities along that strategy, and use plans and sub plans to execute that. Don't think that a plan that existed 20 years ago. That's why you carry on using now, but it's not taking you to a particular strategic direction that
Mhm.
you need to go. So
Absolutely. Mm.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
my challenge for leaders in that sense.
Mm. 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 No, no, that's really fascinating what you mentioned there. Like we have we can and I mean there's this saying that they have the best laid plans out can fail if there's no strategy behind it. So
Thank you.
yes.
You've just nailed it there in one sentence. Isn't that great? I couldn't have said it better. No, that's it. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, I think it's really amazing what you're saying here that there's a real distinctive difference between a strategy and between a plan. And with the strategy, it's more focused on, I guess, having a really bigger picture understanding of the direction that we're heading in. But I guess there's also another element that's really needed, and that's what I wanted to kind of hear from you. What happens when leaders are finding that there's many obstacles that come along the way, which are, of course, forms of disruption as well,
Hmm,
and
hmm.
opportunities for growth, opportunities to shift our paradigm, opportunities to think differently, to change our mindset. What is it that they have that allows them to still keep moving ahead, forging ahead to formulate that strategy? What do you believe they really possess in strength that allows them to do that?
Yeah, the one thing that comes to my mind very quickly in response to that is, uh, first of all, when you are faced with a challenge, it's a challenge because you don't have an immediate answer. That's what qualifies it as a challenge. And as a leader myself, I would say that the first thing I want to do is to create a culture, an inclusive culture and a creative culture, a culture of design thinking within the organization. Then that is almost like you have created an insurance policy to underwrite all the challenges that will be thrown at you. Once you have a culture of inclusion, design thinking, and engagement within the organization, when challenges come, just as we said, you operate like the anthropologist, and before you know, you see the answers to the questions coming from unlikely angles within your organization. So, a team that has got that inherent culture of resilience will be the outcome of that kind of culture of design thinking and inclusion.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. 100%. I agree that resilience is really important. And you also have mentioned earlier today about the power of adaptability and how that can really play a really big role in being able to shift and move in that direction towards the strategy that leaders have I guess created. So I guess the only other aspect that I thought would be really interesting to touch on is why do you think disruption happens? What is it for? What does it do to us as human beings?
Well, yeah. Oh, sorry. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. I think I can hear you.
Okay.
I don't know why the screen seems to move away from. Yeah,
Oh,
I don't know. Can you see me?
yes, I can see you.
Okay, all right. That's okay then. No problem. Well,
Okay.
the thing is, when we talk about this disruption, sometimes uh, we don't automatically presume that what really defines disruption is that it is a combination of factors outside your control. You see, you couldn't have serve disrupt. You cannot serve disrupt. So the factors would normally be beyond your control, and therefore, uh, what we are advocating is that you have to create a balance between reaction and response. Let me put this into perspective. Reaction in that you just jump off and start doing e-commerce without looking at the viability of closing your high street shop. That is a simple reaction to the fact that we now have internet and people can order. You have not even assessed as to whether majority of your customers are still those who walk into the shop floor and on the high street and buy. So that is a very quick reaction that has not really provided evidence that you are going to reach more people, as we said earlier. A response would be putting it through a market research filter to look at your customer base and assess whether closing the shop would decrease the number of customers at the baseline level that come to your shop or that buy your products, or it's going to maintain it at the same numbers. So you cannot just respond without a filter to it, without a market filter to what you are doing. And in my view, that's what this whole level of response, or what should govern your response or adaptability, that's what should govern it. You balance response and reaction. Reaction is normally without sufficient evidence. Response is putting it through an evidence filter.
No, that's very, 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 very powerful. Would you be able to just repeat that last line just for our audience?
Okay.
That's very
So
powerful.
so you have to balance response
Mm,
with reaction. A reaction is not evidence based. Response puts things through the filter of evidence as to what the effectiveness is.
that's very powerful. That's really well said. So I guess, I think we've had such rich discussions here today. So I think I'll actually try and summarize now where we're at. So we've spoken a lot about disruption and how it's a cornerstone of innovation. We've talked about what disruption is. It's anything that really challenges us. We also talked a little bit about how it's really a turning point for growth and transformation, if we see it like that, if we are genuinely involved in that process of seeing that as an opportunity for our growth rather than seeing it as something negative. We also talked about different examples of how disruption comes about in organizations, in corporate sector, comes about in the education industry as well. And we talked particularly about this really interesting concept called innovation dilemma, which I thought was brilliant. There's a lot of organizations out there that just want to innovate just for the sake of thinking that they need to innovate. But really, it's about connecting to your intention, your values, your organizational values. Why are you trying to innovate? Is it going to allow you to serve your customers well? Is it going to improve the efficiency in your organization? Is it going to make things better? So it's really a case of these disruptions become an element of testing us, keeping us in check. how much do we really understand the world and how much do we really understand ourselves? And this is, I guess, where we talked about the element of response versus reaction. And here we talked about the power of using filters. We spoke a little bit about when you have a reaction without evidence, you're basically just reacting in the way that you always have. But if you want to have a more appropriate response, you need evidence to back it up and to be able to use that filter to decide how to move ahead. And we also definitely spoke about some of the key things that leaders have within themselves to be able to turn this disruption around to create innovation for their organizations. And one of them is about resilience, the power of resilience and the role it plays in allowing leaders to just keep forging ahead, persevering based on the strategy that they've created for their organization. And of course, we talked about that strategies and plans, they're not the same thing. There's definitely a difference between them. And it does involve us to be very adaptive. So I'm really grateful. I've learned so much today, and I really hope that our audience has enjoyed themselves as well today. So we're going to basically finish up here with just a little bit about sharing about our institute. So if you've enjoyed our webinar today, um, then please do join us on LinkedIn. And I'm excited to say that we have many exciting events coming up, both online and in-person events here in Mauritius. We have a series of mental health forums coming up as well. So for those of you who are joining here from Mauritius, we do encourage you to join us on our platform. And of course, if you are interested in our retreats, if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about what Abhyas does and really how can we establish this connection and this holistic approach, then coming along for a retreat is one of the best things from our website, www.abhyas.mu. And of course, with that, I just want to say a really warm thank you, a very big element of gratitude for Dr. Nawana today. It's been such an insightful, interesting discussion. I will never forget the terms snail mail. It's been a long time hearing that. So it's good to hear those old terms kind of coming back. But this has just been a really, really interesting topic. And I think it's a topic that really does, need to be discussed a lot more in our corporate world, but also in any industry that we work in. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all again. Our next webinar is this Friday. So really looking forward to this topic is a really fascinating one. It's actually definitely close to my heart, but I believe it's something that everyone is concerned of. It's all about financial well-being and its impact on mental health. So please do come along to this webinar and explore this topic with me. We'll be having 3 fabulous panel members on this topic to really explore this concept in more detail. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me here today on this platform. I'm very grateful to all of you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. For now, thank you very much and goodbye.